Welcome everyone, and please join us as we explore a beautiful city with an interesting, if somewhat troubled history. I'm speaking of Dublin, Ireland. After our flight from Oklahoma City to Dublin, we will begin our tour at Dublin Castle. Construction began on Dublin Castle around 1204 AD and was largely completed by 1230. However, much of the original medieval fortress was destroyed by a fire in 1684. In the years following, the structure was rebuilt more as a palace than a castle. The record tower which you see here is the sole surviving tower of the medieval castle dating from 1228. Until 1922, the castle served as the seat of the British government's administration in Ireland. The castle now hosts the inauguration of each president of Ireland. Very near the castle is our next stop, St. Patrick's Cathedral. Construction began on the cathedral in the year 1191. In 1870, the Church of Ireland designated St. Patrick's Cathedral the National Cathedral of Ireland. Dublin-born Jonathan Swift was for a time the Dean of St. Patrick's Cathedral. Jonathan Swift is perhaps most famous for his work Gulliver's Travels, published in 1726. Upon his death in 1745, Jonathan Swift was laid to rest inside the cathedral. Trinity College was established by a royal decree from Queen Elizabeth I in 1592. Trinity College is one of the 7 ancient universities of Great Britain and Ireland. The world-famous library contains over 7 million volumes. One of the artifacts on display at the library is this harp dated to the 14th or 15th century. This harp is perhaps most famously used as the model for the harp in the logo of Guinness beer. However, the most famous artifact in the library is the Book of Kells. The Book of Kells is an illuminated manuscript containing the 4 Gospels of the New Testament that was created sometime around the year 800. The manuscript was kept at the Abbey of Kells for over 800 years before being moved to the college in 1661. The Jeannie Johnson is a museum ship moored on the River Liffey. It is a replica of the sailing ships that would have brought immigrants from Ireland to America. Yes, the ship is available for tours. This rather interesting bit of architecture is near the Jeannie Johnson. This is the Samuel Beckett Bridge. The main deck of the bridge is supported by a spar with 31 cables designed to look like a harp. Opened in 2009, the bridge can swing open to allow boats to pass through. We stayed at the Hilton Dublin during our visit to Dublin. The Hilton Dublin is right on the Grand Canal, and I found these dinner boats and houseboats to be quite interesting. Before we proceed any further, I do want to make it known that the purpose of this video is just to help you plan your visit to Dublin. And a complete historical description of the events surrounding these next locations is beyond the scope of this channel or this video. I will, however, leave a few links in the description below for other videos you can watch if you'd like to learn more. With all that said now, let's return to Dublin, Ireland. Also on the River Liffey is the Custom House. As the name suggests, the building was originally constructed to collect customs on goods being shipped in and out of the port of Dublin. During the Irish War of Independence, the Irish Republican Army set fire to the building in 1921 in order to disrupt British rule over Ireland by destroying tax records. The building was rebuilt after the war in 1928. The Four Courts building was the scene of major events during the Irish Civil War. The Four Courts building was originally built to house the 4 superior courts of Ireland. In April of 1922, IRA forces opposed to the Anglo-Irish Treaty occupied the building. This occupation provoked fighting between the IRA and the new Irish National Troops. During the fighting to retake the building, a huge explosion rocked the building, destroying the entire west wing. Of the approximate 200 men inside the building, only about 15 were killed. However, in the aftermath, over 450 IRA members were captured by the pro-treaty forces. This leads us to a nearby area with an equally interesting history from the Easter Rising of 1916 and beyond. Nearby, the O'Connell Monument has overlooked the River Liffey since 1882. The monument was placed to honor Daniel O'Connell, who was the political leader of Ireland's Roman Catholic majority in the first half of the 19th century. Of course, the one downside of having a monument built in your honor is you always end up with a pigeon on your head. The monument overlooks O'Connell Bridge over the River Liffey. O'Connell Street along with O'Connell Bridge have been the scene of a great deal of history of Dublin and the Irish Republic over the last 100 years. Some of the interesting history of O'Connell Street involves Nelson's Pillar, which opened in 1809 very nearby. Originally constructed in 1808, the 134-foot or 40-meter pillar was built to honor British Admiral Horatio Nelson. Admiral Nelson is most well known for his commands of the Royal Navy during the Napoleonic Wars. The area near Nelson's Pillar and O'Connell Monument on O'Connell Street was the scene of a great deal of fighting during the Easter Rising of 1916. Despite being damaged in the events of 1916, Nelson's Pillar remained standing. As Admiral Nelson had no ties to Ireland, the pillar was seen as a symbol of British rule. Over the night of March 7, 1966, members of the IRA placed explosives and destroyed the pillar. The remaining stump of the pillar was taken down by the authorities the next week. Pieces of the pillar are displayed all over Ireland. Here is Lord Nelson's head on display at the library in Dublin. After the destruction of Nelson's Pillar in 1966, the site remained vacant. Finally, in 2002, the Dublin City Council approved the construction of the Spire of Dublin in its place. The spire is 120 meters or 390 feet tall. A location like Kilmainham Gaol may not come to mind for most visitors to Dublin as a good place to spend some time. However, we believe everyone will find their visit to Kilmainham Gaol worth their time. This is a restored courtroom that was used when the prison was actively housing prisoners. In the first half of the 19th century, over 4,000 prisoners from Kilmainham Gaol were transported to Australia. If you do plan to visit the jail during your time in Dublin, I would recommend that you book your tickets in advance. There's a very good museum at the jail which gives you an extensive history of the facility. You should also be aware that once you begin your tour of the interior of the jail, no video is allowed. However, you are permitted to take photographs. When originally opened, there was no segregation of prisoners. Men, women, and children were all incarcerated up to 5 per cell. The leaders of the Easter Rising of 1916 were all imprisoned here after their capture. Here in the jail they were court-martialed and sentenced to death. They were allowed to visit loved ones and write their final goodbyes before the sentences were carried out. Here in the Stonebreakers Yard between the 3rd and 12th of May 1916, 14 men were executed by firing squad. During the Irish Civil War, 4 IRA members were also executed here by the Irish Free State Army. Of course, there is a great deal more history of Kilmainham Gaol that I do not have time to cover here, I will leave a link in the description below. Construction on the original Christ Church Cathedral began around the year 1030. That time, Dublin was still a Viking outpost. Over the centuries, the cathedral fell into a state of disrepair. The cathedral was extensively renovated and rebuilt from 1871 to 1878. The project was funded by the sponsorship of a local distiller, Henry Rowe. Part of the cathedral now houses the Dublinia Museum. This museum focuses on Dublin's Viking and medieval history. Located in Phoenix Park near the zoo, the Wellington Monument honors Dublin-born Arthur Wellesley, the first Duke of Wellington. The Duke of Wellington is perhaps most famous for his service to the British Army during the Napoleonic Wars, including his defeat of Napoleon at the Battle of Waterloo. After the war, he returned to politics and eventually rose to become the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Swords Castle was originally constructed for the Archbishops of Dublin in the early 13th century. The castle and estate had fallen into disrepair by the 14th and 15th centuries. The castle has been undergoing a multi-phase long-term restoration project since the 1990s. The castle is located on the north side of Dublin, very near the airport. Admission to the castle is free and a tour will not take you very long. Malahide Castle, parts of which date back to the 12th century, lies close to the village of Malahide. The estate covers approximately 260 acres. The estate began in 1185 when Richard Talbot was granted the lands and harbor of Malahide by Henry II. The estate remained in the Talbot family for 791 years, from 1185 until 1976. Final member of the Talbot family that lived in the castle, Rose Talbot, ceded the property to the Irish government in 1975 to cover outstanding inheritance taxes. The large estate now forms a regional park and hosts many concerts. That brings us back to one of the most popular attractions in Dublin, the Guinness Brewery and Storehouse. The self-guided tours will take you through a history of the Guinness Brewery. The displays inside go over the production methods and what makes Guinness different than almost any other beer in the world. Your tour ends at the rooftop bar and includes a free pint of Guinness. Large glass walls offer great views of the entire city of Dublin. As you can imagine, this tour is a very popular attraction. I would advise you purchase your tickets in advance. We'll end our tour of Dublin here in the Temple Bar District. The Temple Bar District has countless bars, restaurants, and coffee houses. Of course, the district is named for its most famous establishment, the Temple Bar. However, I will warn you, as this is the most famous drinking establishment in Dublin, the lines to enter can be quite long. Rather than wait in line, we popped in right next door to the Whiskey Reserve. Whether you're a whiskey sommelier or complete rookies like us, we believe you will greatly enjoy your time at the Whiskey Reserve. Before we close out our video, I need to just briefly mention our sponsor, Fairdrop.com. Fairdrop.com will send you great deals on flights from airports that you select. We used Fairdrop.com to get a great deal on our flight to Dublin. In full disclosure, if you do use our link below to sign up, we do get a small commission to help support the channel. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and please like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you in the next video.
I went into me chamber for to take a slumber. I dreamt of gold and jewels, and for sure it was no wonder. But Jenny drew me charges, and she filled them up with water, and sent the Captain Farrell to make ready for the slaughter. Mushering-a-ma-doo-da-ma-da,